Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an HOA tried to kick an 80-year-old man off his own land, claiming that he has not paid HOA fees for over 3 years. Let's dive right into the story to find out what happened. So I recently became a homeowner for the very first time, but unfortunately I don't get to join the vaunted Hall of Fame of those new homeowners who are horribly wronged by a homeowners association. In fact, I refused to buy a house that was in the same neighborhood as an HOA. I even avoided houses in neighborhoods where signing the HOA contract was optional, and many residents said that they were not intrusive. I did all this because all it takes is one extra person getting power, or one day where the HOA gets power hungry, and they will try to take your home away or at least charge you unreasonable amounts of money for the good of the neighborhood. I was lucky enough to learn this ahead of time, and the HOA I learned it from was unlucky enough to bring their complaint against my great-grandfather. I will just call him GG, the hard-headed man that he was. See, I had a great relationship with my grandfather. Apparently, when my mom and her siblings were younger, he had been angrier because it was around that time that his children all decided to leave the state and home of their youth behind. The home that Gigi owned was land that had been in the family since before the American Civil War. This led to many of his grandchildren not having good relationships with him. However, he did come and extend a peace offering with the birth of his great-grandchildren, having seen many of the errors of his ways. Many of my aunts and uncles turned away this peace offering, but my mother didn't. This meant that I got to know my Gigi and learned so much about him and, through stories about the family, his pride in who he and his family were. Safe to say, the land was securely in Gigi's name. A housing settlement ended up being built neighboring his property, which Gigi said he was happy about after being stranded all alone after the previous owners had sold their land. The issue came with something that he did not realize the issue of until later on. The settlement was managed by an HOA, and when the HOA took charge over the settlement, they briefly came to my GG and asked if he would like to sign a contract to include his land into the HOA management jurisdiction. My GG scoffed and asked what kind of a man he might be if he could not even manage his own land. He waved them away and said that he would be selling his land before the day came that he couldn't enjoy it or use it any longer. I knew this upset him because he did not have any family who would take it after him, but even as much as I love GG and his land, it is not for me. That was the last thing GG heard from the HOA for years afterwards. It seemed obvious that they had asked, he had answered, and then they had respected his boundaries and left him alone. The more HOA stories you read though, the more obvious that this doesn't happen often enough. I was around 10 years old when the HOA came to visit him again 3 years later. I happened to be visiting while my parents were going to a funeral, and instead of bringing their restless kid along, they offloaded me on the way. I had just come in from feeding the chickens while Gigi was finishing up his own chores. I could see the driveway from the kitchen table where I was waiting, which allowed me to see the car that pulled up. I did not recognize it, which meant that they were probably in the wrong place, as Gigi did not have that many visitors on his land. 4 people piled out of the car in a burst of frantic activity and huddled around one of the people that came out of the passenger seat with a clipboard holding a sheaf of papers. This man with the papers turned out to be the brand new president of the HOA, who decided that he was not gonna allow the continued abuse of the HOA's properties that apparently my GG had been perpetuating. The other 3 were those members of the HOA that had always been toxic but were forced to hide it due to the actual ethical business that their leaders were doing. No such need for ethics now though. They had never forgiven GG for turning down the HOA and then forever affecting their property values by allowing wild growth to extend to the very borders of the neighborhood. I know now that the set to their shoulders and their frantic energy on this day came from a vindication of their self-centered beliefs. The old fart would finally contribute and by doing so would accept their leadership. Or at least that's what they thought would happen. My GG comes into the scene and stands at ease before these invaders like the hero I did and still do believe that he is. They all faced him. Meanwhile, I made myself to the propped open front door so I could hear them through the screen. The new HOA president says, "Nice to meet you, GG. I've heard plenty about you, so I feel like I already know you." Gigi was obviously already on guard because he replied, "Well, in that case you have the advantage because I still don't know your name." The president looked down at his clipboard, aghast like a script was there and Gigi had broken it to pieces without any hesitation. He reddened a bit before looking up to meet Gigi's cool gaze. "Press." Gigi raised his eyebrows and watched Press for a moment. After what felt longer than the mere seconds it must have been, the president spoke up again and said, "And with me I know those three. Anyway, what are you doing on my land uninvited?" The man's confidence was easily turned into anger when faced with my Gigi's confidence, and by now our friend Press was fuming. "We are on your land to discuss your 3 years of unpaid dues for the HOA and what our options are moving forward in order to ensure that no one here is unfairly hurt by this situation." Gigi gave a big belly laugh. "Unpaid dues? Are you really implying that your little organization has some sort of power over my family's land?" "I don't care who owns the land, our HOA manages it. We manage the neighboring housing settlement and this house and land as well. I can show you exactly where our forms say so." Gigi then said, "I don't care what land the city said you were allowed to control. They don't own the land we are standing upon and they couldn't give you authority over it. I was given the choice to join 3 years ago when you fellas came along and I chose not to." The press had been holding the clipboard out to Gigi, who did not take his eyes off of Press's face. Press lost the staring contest as he looked back down at the clipboard and flipped a few pages and then held it out again. "That was an error on the part of my predecessor, one I don't intend to allow any longer. If you look here, you can see that the city has given us authority over this property." Even just a brief stint of conversation with my Gigi holding his gaze had Press looking anywhere to avoid Gigi's eyes. So Gigi turned and looked at each of the 3 men that he had known for the last 3 years until they were squirming too. Gigi finally said, "What is it that you expect to happen now that you are claiming your power over land that you are trespassing?" Press almost seems to take a moment to even recognize that he had been asked a question. He stammered out, Well, you see, we would be forced to pursue further legal action." Back to the trusty clipboard, Press pulled out a few yellow forms and handed them to Gigi. "Those are your eviction notices. I'll be planning to come back with the city on the date listed and remove you bodily if you insist on remaining." Gigi stayed calm and said, "Let me get this straight. You are planning to bodily remove a man from his own property that you are trespassing on and then seize all of the property that is in a house that has been in his family for over a century, right?" I think Press took this to mean that Gigi was actually gonna allow this to happen, and some of his arrogance came back as he looked up at Gigi and nodded. "That's exactly what I intend to have happen." My Gigi bid them to wait and came up to the house. When he saw me tucked out of sight by the screen door, he laughed again, and I knew that Press was quite stupid to have the confident gleam of greed in his eye when my Gigi walked away. Apparently, he thought that the old man was actually going inside for his checkbook. The men were back in a huddle around their clipboard. My Gigi had gone further into the house and I hadn't seen or heard anything from him before I suddenly heard the loudest thunder of any storm trying to send souls to Oz. Only it was a clear sky out. When my bony ass landed on the ground, I realized exactly what had happened. I confirmed it when my Gigi walked around the corner of the house with his smoking shotgun pointing up at the sky over his head. Press looked just about ready to wet his pants when he turned and saw my Gigi standing there with his shotgun. Gigi did not give him a chance to speak before he said, "Press, this here is my land and it will be for a while longer. So if you truly want to threaten me with assault and robbery, then I hope you can understand why I would be prepared to defend myself." It was like Looney Tunes when Press's backup all zipped into the car. Their misplaced confidence was easier to crush than Press's. "This is absurd, Gigi. You're threatening me with a gun won't do anything to improve your home situation." Gigi said, "Press, we both know that your HOA has no claim on my land unless I agree to pay those dues that I supposedly allowed to build up. Now believe me, I'm prepared to defend my land and you just made yourself uninvited upon it for the rest of my life. If I smell your hair gel on my land again, I'll shoot first and see if you mount half as well as the deer in the den." Their bluff was safely called. Gigi vanished in the backyard for a bit to lock up the shotgun again, and when he came, I was waiting for him. "Gigi, we don't have any deer heads in the den." And if I think they are morbid, then you can be sure I wouldn't want that man's ugly mug staring at me anytime I needed a good nap in my chair. Now, I don't trust myself to have half the confidence my Gigi has, so now you can see why I stayed away from HOAs entirely. And the next one is titled, "Boss Stole My Money." And by the way, if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. I'm a contractor, and while working on a project in a very remote location, I arranged to buy and bring 2 rounds of breakfast tacos for the staff of the county facility where I would be working for the next week in exchange for free copy privileges. The boss gave approval on the phone, and the total for the tacos that week came out to just over $100. A great exchange, as the copy budget was upwards of $1,000. My receipts, along with the supporting CC statement I submitted at the end of the billing cycle between a week and 2 weeks after he had verbally approved the expense, was declined. I was not too angry, but a deal is a deal, and I called the boss to remind him that he had approved the expense. His response was, "You should have gotten it in writing." Pissed me off royally, but I finished the project as promised and was working on another project for another client less than a week later. A couple months go by, and the boss who had chiseled me out of the dollars called to see if I was available to work on another project beginning on the 1st of the next month, and after some haggling, I agreed. The work schedule would be tight, and in his words, this was an all-hands-on-deck project with nights and weekends expected. I was also told this was a new client and they wanted to impress. A couple days before the project was set to begin, the chiseler called me to tell me the engagement paperwork was on the way and check my email. I told him I had decided not to work the project after all, and he was furious. He screamed, "You agreed to work on this project weeks ago." I repeated his words verbatim and said, "You should have gotten it in writing." And the next one is titled, "Sprained ankle, boss wanted a doctor's note to pay 1 day of sick time, now he is paying a week." I twisted and sprained my ankle Monday morning packing up our camp from Labor Day weekend. Having done this a few times in the past, I didn't want to bother to have it checked out. Who wants to pay $1,000 for urgent care to tell you to rest and ice it? Yay, America! So I went to work on Tuesday. I got morning stuff done and explained the situation to my boss, told him I would need to take the day off because it was swollen and painful and I needed to rest and be off of it in order for it to heal. He gets in a tizzy because God forbid anyone needs to miss work for anything at all ever, and snaps at me for not planning to go to the doctor. Wednesday, I go into work still limping and still wearing improper footwear. I can only fit the injured foot into a crock without unbearable pain. The first thing the boss says is, "Don't you think you should get that checked out? I don't understand why you don't want to just pay for it." I explain again that I've had this injury in the past. It's definitely not broken, and honestly not even as swollen as it has been when I have done it before. I want to be at work to keep up on things and make everyone's job less difficult. I would just need to take it easy for a couple days, which is not a problem, considering I can do 90% of the job from my desk and the 10% slack is beyond easy for everyone to pick up, especially when not being there makes them pick up 100% of it. This gets met with more attitude, so I ask if I'll be getting paid sick time for the day I missed yesterday. He says no, not without a doctor's note. You can visibly see the injury clear as day, and I'm trying here, so what the hell? I'm fed up at this point, so a little later on, I say okay and leave to go to the doctors for the note he wants so badly, knowing full well what they would say to treat it and that I'll need to be off of it for 3 to 5 days. After an x-ray and getting the "Yep, it's sprained, keep doing what you've been doing," I let them know that my boss asked for a note for missing a day of work to rest it, and the doctor asks if I want to be at work to do what I can and stay off of it as best as possible, and I say that's what I've been trying to do, so I'm fine with what I do, have sick time if it would be more beneficial to be off of it for a couple days. She comes back with a note that says that I may return to work on 9th September, which would be Monday. I took a picture and shot it over to Bossman, just a photo. He replies, "What's wrong with ankle?" which I met with no response considering none is needed. He got his note. I just wanted a day of sick time, 8 hours, and now he's paying me 4 days, 32 hours. He cannot refuse a second of it. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Before I found this page, I never had a name for the group that kind of controlled my neighborhood. In America they are called HOAs, but down here in South America it gets a little more complicated. I want to call them an HOA because from what I understand the role is similar, just without power being given to them by anybody. So similar to our neighbors up north, we can have problems with them taking more than they should, and that happened to me last year. I don't live in a rich neighborhood, and sometimes it can be easier to let land sit for a while. When my brother died and gave his property to me, I did not know what to do with it at first. He did not even have a house there or anything, it was just a spare lot of land. I did the only thing I could think of and fenced it off until I could come up with something. Maybe hope for prices to go up so I could make something off of it. I wanted more than anything to discuss it with my family first, so I went to visit my parents for a couple of weeks, figure out what we were doing for the funeral and what I could do with the land. My mom did not want me keeping the lot, she did not even want me to keep my own property because of how bad the area was. The only positive thing I could say was that the HOA who ran things were not a gang. I cannot say that for everywhere around here, they were bad people though and always wanted to try and get more money from others. One time they even tried to charge people for having company or parties, a noise fee they called it. If that doesn't show you how bad these people are, then what I will tell you next will change your mind really fast. When I got back home and went to check on the lot, I saw that it had been transformed. There was never grass or anything, but when I left it, it was a land made of dirt fenced in. Now there was gravel, small gravel like the kind you can drive onto. The fence was gone and replaced with a much fancier gate. At the gate, a man who was taking money to let people come in and park. They saw the empty land and knew that the owner had just died. Their first thought was to turn around and make money off of it. I went to the guy standing at the gate. Me, what's going on here? This is my land. Man, no way. The HOA owns this lot and if you want to park here, you have to pay. Otherwise you can turn around and leave. Me, I'm not going anywhere. You cannot keep me out of my own damn property. I want every single car here gone or I swear I will get them out myself. Man, you come onto this parking lot and I promise that you're not gonna like what happens next. I don't like to back down, but when a guy is twice your size and looks like he could kill you with one punch, well, let's just say I walked away to try and find something else that I could do. Going to the HOA felt like a waste of my time because they would not help me, they stole it from me, but I figured that I better go and talk to them so I can say that I did. The last thing I need is them getting away with it because I never went to complain and claimed the land. I told them about the land and they just told me it did not matter if my brother left it to me. They had a right to it over me because it was an empty lot and the HOA can take over things once the owner dies. Well, there's no law that says they can do that and I knew for a fact that my brother was not an HOA member because I was not either. We hated these guys honestly, and the fact that we didn't get harassed for not joining too much was a blessing. Now they wanted to screw me over though and take land that I didn't even want in the first place. It did not matter since I was never gonna let somebody waltz in and take what belongs to me. I did not let it happen when I was a kid playing with toys and I was not about to let it happen again. I knew that I didn't have the money and the HOA knew that I didn't have money. What I did have though was profits from the sale of my brother's actual house. Not much, but enough to hire a lawyer and get him to take on my case. Despite being young, he did have a will and all the correct paperwork in place to leave me the property. I filed a lawsuit against the HOA and even my lawyer told me that if I did this, it could make my life living in that neighborhood very hard. I moved forward anyway, and after a long time I finally got a chance to show a court that I owned the property. The HOA guys had a really expensive lawyer who tried to claim that by living in the neighborhood my brother forfeited his rights to give away the land. That it instantly went to the HOA instead. My lawyer chimed in that there was no law stating they got the land if my brother died. Not unless they had a contract of him agreeing to that. The kind of thing they probably put in small print for people that joined the HOA and then gave them the money. However, no contract for my brother could be found since, like I said, we never joined this HOA. They were ordered to remove the gate and parking lot from my land, and then they were told that they had to give me all the money they made from people parking, and if they didn't give the right amount, the government would come in and freeze their bank accounts until they got to the bottom of the correct amount of money. It turns out they had made a ton and wanted to just walk away and pocket all of it. I had that money now and the lot I could do anything I wanted with. I did the thing that would make myself and my mom the happiest. I sold both the lot and my own property and I used the money to move to a different neighborhood. One that was slightly nicer and did not have an HOA trying to control things. Plus, it was closer to my parents, which I knew she appreciated also. The funny thing was that I think now the empty lot is being used as rental property, meaning somebody is making a ton of money and I doubt the HOA is seeing a penny of it. Mainly because it seemed that after the lawsuit, many of the members scattered like the scared cockroaches they are. Now nobody is really running that neighborhood either, but I still think it was for the best that I left. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much for your help. The next pro-revenge story started like this. Let's start this story by saying, this happened 12 years ago, I am now happily married with 3 children and regret absolutely nothing. I was with my new ex for 3 years, I had noticed that she was being extremely controlling, I was expected to give every little detail of my day and tell her my schedule in advance. And if I deviated from that, she would be very upset. She chalked it up to just bad feelings she was having and shrugged it off as her paranoia for past relationships of infidelity. I had never once cheated or strayed, and I never gave her a reason to act like this. It felt unbecoming of my fiancé to act in such a way. Now this is where it gets juicy. After she had asked for my schedule to make plans, as mine tend to be more hectic than hers, I noticed she was texting someone. In my line of work, if I put in more than 40 hours, I have the ability to take time off at will as long as the work is completed at a later date. I was very good friends with a brother and still am. We laugh about this to this day and he actively reminds her of it. I messaged him stating that I wanted to do something special for her a little bit earlier than our anniversary to make sure it was a special surprise. They both worked in the same fabrication facility, he was a fabricator and she a shipping manager. He was kind enough to let me know her schedule, and that's where the discrepancy falls into place. Without my knowledge, she was foregoing overtime and she worked 12-hour shifts Monday through Friday, with the exception of Wednesday, when she would only work half a day. She had been taking Wednesdays off right around the time that she started getting extremely controlling. Lucky for me, I had stacked several days of leisure time up, so taking a Wednesday off for me was not an issue. A few days go by and Wednesday is here, I put on my work gear and leave for work. I was expecting her to leave as our apartment complex had 2 exits on the same road I could see directly across from a shopping center, so I parked my car near the back and waited. After about an hour, I noticed a very specific red Mustang with a specific decal on the back window. So this was her cousin by marriage. I had also done my due diligence to take an old laptop, which we kept on our desk in an office area, with a full view of the living room, bedroom door and bathroom plus the kitchen. I had set it up for remote access and had it alert me when the webcam noticed movement. So, giving her the benefit of the doubt, I thought he maybe be dropping something off or coming over to assist her with something, as her family sometimes does. Sure enough though, a message came through, so I remoted into my laptop. He walks through the door without skipping a beat, she unbuttons his shirt and begins kissing him. I created a URL link for the live stream. And as she was preoccupied, we had a family group text and a friend group text. They were both part of it, but at the current time, they were currently indisposed and didn't look at their phones. They did not even wait, they could have gone to the bedroom, but no, they decided to get freaky deaky right there on the couch. I sent the link off to the friend group chat and the family group chat, and within minutes I'm getting calls non-stop from friends and family alike. There was no turning back. She was getting blown up, but she was ignoring her phone. Not until the 4th or 5th call came through did they decide to take a break. For context, the state I live in allows recording of personal property regardless of occupancy. I was the only one on the lease and she was not allowed to be on the lease because of poor credit. The call she had picked up was from her cousin's mom, who she was banging. She answers the phone on speaker and I kid you not, the first words out of his mom's mouth were, "Stop effing my son." They both became rigid and she began to stutter over her words saying, "What are you talking about?" etc. The mother then divulged that there was a live feed of them sent out by me to her family. She grabbed every pillow off the couch and covered herself up. The cousin staggered off, trying to put on his pants and shoes just to trip himself up and bang his head off of my coffee table. Leaving it with a DeVoe, by this time I had made my way to the front of the apartment complex. I was there to greet the adulterer as he came out of the front exit. He froze and began to cry, apologizing profusely. I'm not gonna lie, what happened afterwards was not my best moment and I nearly got into legal trouble if it weren't for the fact that he was trespassing on private property. Let's just say I had a cast for 6 weeks and he was not in any family photos for months. So I went up to the apartment where she was now fully closed and crying inconsolably. I asked her what that snot was on her face. Then I told her not to answer because it didn't matter anyway. I gave her 1 hour to remove all her belongings, as again everything in the apartment was mine except for clothes, some makeup and a few kitchen utensils. Her mom would not let her move in as she was just filled with embarrassment. Same for her brothers, and the cousin's mom kicked her son out. Rumors spread around our town very quickly, and for a lack of better words, she was very untouchable. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads, and also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.